We're still trying to decide how many teams of the SEC belong in the college football playoff, but we know for a fact that 4 will be going from the Big Ten. I do not have the qualifications to talk about the Big Ten, but George Wrighster from the Unafraid Show on YouTube and SiriusXM Nightcap certainly can. So welcome on into SEC Unfiltered. I am Cole Thompson. He is George Wrighster. Make sure that you like the video, hit that ring notification down below, and hit subscribe because we bring on guests like George. We talk everything about the SEC. We talk everything about the Big Ten. We're going to break down which conference is better. But more importantly, we're going to talk more so about the college football playoff. Make sure that you download the podcast version of the show wherever you get your podcast listening systems. Follow us on the socials, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at SEC Unfiltered. Download the podcast and make sure that you check us out at SECUnfiltered.com. This episode is brought to you by our friends over at RHOBACK. The holiday season is right around the corner. And what better stocking stuffer gift to give someone in your life than a RHOBACK pullover, a RHOBACK fleece, a RHOBACK hoodie? And you know what? When you go use the promo code SECU, the fine folks at RHOBACK are going to give you 20% off. It's the gift that keeps on giving. SEC Unfiltered is giving your family a bit more of a holiday treat. Go use the promo code SECU at RHOBACK.com. George, Oregon was my pick to win the national championship this year. Just throwing that out there. So
okay.
I am respecting the Big Ten. I am respecting that they are a conference that has earned the right to stick out its chest, and they have the one lone undefeated roster still standing.
Yep.
They got a game this weekend against Penn State.
Yeah.
This to me feels like the most complete team in college football when the bells and whistles are humming. The Wisconsin game, they had 7 games in a row before they finally got a bye week. So
yes,
kind of got a little bit of rest at that point. I think that we still can say that currently the crown jewel when it comes to the standard of 2024 is out at Autzen Stadium, which is one of the best atmospheres in college football. And more importantly, it runs through Dan Lanning and the Ducks.
Oh, for sure, man. So I want to preface everything I'm going to say because people will say, oh, George, you played at Oregon and all of this stuff. You're a Big Ten guy. You're a Pac-12 guy. Listen, I am a college football fan.
Right.
So think about everything I'm going to say from the lens of this is a person that loves college football and wants what's best for college football. And there have been so many narratives about this season, and we'll get into talking about those. But Oregon has been the most complete team this season, and this is going to be the 3rd team that is currently inside of the top 10 that they have played. And this is going to be a tough matchup. I think it's going to be a tougher matchup for Penn State just because when you look at what they've done over the course of the season, it has not been with their wideouts as their main weapons. It's been Tyler Warren, their tight end, who's a fantastic player. And I love tight ends like him that can get the opportunity to do so many different things and projects well to go to the NFL and everything else. But this is a team that is a little bit limited in what they do offensively.
You're not wrong. I think the big thing is that we kind of look so emphasizing on guys like Evan Stewart, who came on in from an SEC school. We look at a guy like Tess Johnson, who was coming back for another year, missed some time because of the injury, going to be back for the college football playoff. Dylan Gabriel, I mean, he's basically got an MD in college football. You expected at this point for them to kind of take that new height underneath Will Stein, a guy that's probably going to get a lot of conversations for head coaching material at G5 school or at maybe a lower tier P4 school. But this defense has been one of the best in college football. The way that I describe Oregon to anybody that asks me is they are a Frankenstein monster of college football because they got weapons that could fit in the Big 12 or in the SEC. They got a running back that everyone in the SEC would love to have. They have an offensive line built for the Big 10. They have guys that you would see at linebacker and in the safety position that would easily find a name out in the ACC or in the SEC. Basically, Dan Lanning's taken bits and parts over the last 2 years to build a roster to where, regardless of location, regardless of environment, and regardless of standard of what you have to play, they will be able to meet it. And they have a second switch, which I think is very important in the college football playoff at this time. They have to be able to win in multiple facets. A team like Oregon can do that.
Yeah, and that's actually been one of the more refreshing parts about this season. Because if you look at kind of the history of Oregon football, right? And when I was there, I got there in '99 when the uniforms changed. And it has been just a revolutionary thing. But then Oregon got known for its offense and not so much its defense, even though that there were a couple of years of good defense in there. But now the standard is built upon obviously scoring points and being an electric offense, but then at the end of the day, you got to lock people down. And you do have to be able to win in different ways. Because look at the Ohio State game. The offense scored more points against Ohio State than Ohio State had been allowing or even allowed all the rest of the season. But then they also were able to get stops when it mattered the most. And you've seen what they've done against other teams. They have literally swallowed teams whole. And they have, and it starts with stopping the run. Because if you can stop the run and make teams one-dimensional, there's only few quarterbacks there's few teams in the whole country that have quarterbacks and wide receivers that are good enough to hurt you.
I think the other thing that's really important here is that this is a top 10 scoring defense in college football.
Yes.
Not a top 10 scoring defense in Big Ten, top 10
Yes.
scoring defense in college football. They have an elite cornerback in Jabbar Muhammad that last year was able to shut down the wide receivers at Texas when he was at Washington before making the jump on over to Eugene. They play this weekend against Penn State. What are some matchups that you're looking forward to that maybe could give an emphasis for whoever is in the SEC? Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, maybe in Alabama, maybe in South Carolina. What are some matchups that you think could be on display that would give a reason to why these teams, whenever they may have to prepare for this, is something that they're going to have to say, we're going to have to work our way around it?
Oh, it is going to start at the quarterback spot. It is going to start with Drew Aller, because I've never been a Drew Aller fan. I know that when you look at the numbers and the stats, he doesn't turn the ball over a ton, even though he's turned the ball over more this year than he has in basically his whole career with 5 interceptions this season. But if you notice, Penn State doesn't really push the ball down the field very much. They are kind of they play what I like to call run and punt football, which is we are going to first down run it, second down run it. Think about the way that Les Miles run offense down there at LSU, and even the way that the game of the century between Alabama and LSU went. I think it was a 9-6 game.
Yeah,
those days are over. You can't play in the SEC like that. You can't play in the Big Ten, the ACC, Big 12. You can't play anywhere like that anymore. And that's kind of been what has been limiting Penn State, is that, yes, Tyler Warren has been a tremendous weapon, but you're not going to beat Oregon. You're not going to beat Ohio State. You're not going to beat any of the more elite defenses in the country with just your tight end being your best player, regardless of how good of a player he is, because at the end of the day, you do have to stretch people up top. And that's where you mentioned Jabbar Muhammad for Oregon. But there's also Nico Reed on the other side, who's done a really good job. And then they're going to be up against, Harrison Wallace, Amari Evans, and those guys. But look at these Penn State stats, and I wanted to make sure I had them right. Tyler Warren, 81 catches, 978 yards, and 6 touchdowns. The wide receivers, if you add up the next 3 wide receivers, they barely have the same amount of catches as Tyler Warren has. That's not a recipe for explosive offense.
Can you imagine if they just would have kept Keandre Lambert-Smith? That's all you needed was one dude. And then you go bring in Julian Fleming and say, oh yeah, he was a number 1 wide receiver recruit. He's not a number 1 on the field. You have talked about this, George. Defense wins championships. Defense in this game, I think, is going to be really big for Oregon. Defense for Penn State is kind of been their bread and butter for the last decade. James Franklin can't win the big one, but he can get coaches to become next P4 program developers, whether it be Brent Pry at Virginia Tech, whether it be Manny Diaz at Duke, and now Tom Allen's come on in, and it's wash, rinse, repeat. What has always stood out about a front 7 for Penn State that makes them a dangerous threat, even if they were to go to the college football playoff and make a run?
Number 1, you got to watch where number 11 is.
Yeah. And
that's number 55 at USC. At Penn State, it's number 11. That's a guy on the defensive side of the ball who is a dude. And so they always have a good pass rush. Their linebackers are fast. And I think that's what makes a really good defense in whether it's the SEC, Big Ten, any of the conferences, is that number 1, you have to have physical defensive linemen, and then you have to have linebackers who can run and are physical and will tackle. And if you can have both of those things, you can have success. And in a good pass rush actually is the biggest thing to having good corners, because corners, then they know I don't have to cover for 5-6 seconds. All I got to do is cover is that I know that the quarterback is only going to have so much time. So we're looking at 3-step routes. We're looking at slants. We're looking at hitches. We're looking at quick outs or go balls. When you limit the time that a quarterback has, that limits the route tree for the wide receivers. They can't run post corners. They can't run the little drag routes all the way across the field and run up and unders and all that stuff. There's no time for that. So it makes it so much easier to cover on the back end when your front seven is good. So this Oregon offensive line, which has kept Dylan Gabriel pretty clean all year, they're going to be tested because this is not for play. Because this Penn State pass rush is for real. And we've seen it in action all year. The only game that they really got exploited all year really was in the USC game. That's the one. And if you can contain Abdul Carter, that number 11, and make sure that he isn't wrecking your game, you're going to have a much better chance against Penn State. Because it's not like – because if you don't turn the ball over, if Oregon doesn't turn the ball over, they're not going to – Penn State's not going to score, 28 points in this game.
When you also look at it, they have a top 7 ranked pass defense. Let me get your opinion on this from an SEC perspective. If you were looking at Penn State and trying to get a good matchup to where they would be able to hold their own against an opponent, whether it be down in the South or whether it be at Happy Valley, who's the one team of the 4? Let's just say Alabama is that last one to sneak on in. So Tennessee, Texas, Georgia, Alabama. Which of the 4 presents the easiest path for victory for a team like Penn State?
Ooh, I'm going to go with probably Alabama.
Okay.
Because Alabama has shown an inability to run the football with their running backs. It is Jalen Milroe. And this is actually one of the hazards of having a dual threat quarterback. See, because there's a difference between a mobile quarterback and a dual threat quarterback. Dylan Gabriel is a mobile quarterback.
Right.
Jalen Milroe is a running quarterback. He is a dual threat quarterback. Is that there are times where he keeps the football and uses his running back as a decoy or as a blocker and follows him to make sure that he's going to then get additional yards. So it makes it tough. And then if you can contain Jalen Milroe, if you pay attention in all of Alabama's losses, he has been contained rushing the football. When he gets loose, they win. But if you can force him to stand back in the pocket and throw the football, number one, he's going to throw it to you. And then number one, you're going to get some sacks and he's going to fumble the football. So, and that plays into Penn State's game because they're not a, 35, they're not going to play the 44 to 42 like Georgia Tech did with Georgia. They got to keep you down. They got to keep you under 21, 25 points. And then they know that they have a chance to win.
I think the other thing that's really important is when they don't run it consistently, they usually find a way to lose. They struggled in the rushing attack against Oklahoma. They struggled in the rushing attack against Vanderbilt. They struggled in the rushing attack against Tennessee. That doesn't struggle when it comes to running the football is Ohio State. Ohio State has 2 great running backs. They do. And Quinshon Judkins kind of knows what it's like to play in the South. So I have no problem to believe he could go back there and make a name for himself. But we do have to talk about the loss that happened to Michigan. We also have to talk about how not only was it egregious because of you spent $10 million to once again watch your seniors go 0-4. You spent over $12 million on players coming back in NIL funds. Ryan Day is facing a hot seat going into this year, especially if they make it to the playoff. They're going to be in the playoff. Whether or not we agree that loss is incredulously awful, they're going to be in the playoff.
Yeah.
But what needs to happen for Ohio State to guarantee Ryan Day is still the right guy? Ryan Day is not on a hot seat. Ryan Day is going to be back in 2025.
He's going to be on the hot seat.
Right.
See, I have 2 rules for firing a coach, and you tell me what the answer to this is if you were an Ohio State fan. First rule is there a coach that you can get? I believe that after every single season, whether you went undefeated or you went defeated and you went 0-12, that every coach needs to be evaluated at the end of the season. And the question needs to be first one is there a coach that I can guarantee get that would do a better job than the guy that I have now? So what's the answer to that question?
For me, it's just if you got to get a guy that's already at a school that he's not leaving. That's the problem.
Yes, exactly.
That's the problem.
Exactly. So yes, you can, you plug and play a decent coach into Ohio State. He's going to win damn near the same amount of games that Ryan Day has won. But here is the second question: is there a loss of hope? Can he still go into 17 to 21-year-olds households and sell them, or in the transfer portal, that the future is brighter than the past?
The question is that when you lose 4 consecutive times in the game,
That's
especially when you don't have when you
there's
don't have
starting
Jim
to be a
Harbaugh
lot.
there.
See, that's the question. There's starting to be a loss of hope, because if you couldn't beat Michigan this year, think about that. You couldn't beat Michigan this year. What is it going to look like when Larry Ellison and Dave Portnoy start just pouring buckets of money into their NIL collective and signing the whole damn roster to Barstool? How is that, or Oracle? How is that supposed to work? How are you supposed, because you had what people deemed the best roster in college football at every single position. But I think their one big mistake roster-wise this year was the way they treated Kyle McCord. They treated him like he was expendable. He went over to Syracuse, except for that Pitt game, which was awful. But if you paid attention to the game, he actually played pretty well in the game. He had some unfortunate picks. But for the whole rest of the season, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the entire country. And Will Howard, when he's had to throw the ball a lot, it ain't really looked good. And I believe that this Michigan game was lost by Ryan Day's ego, because he is so sick and tired of hearing Ohio State's not physical enough. They can't get to the quarterback. They can't run the ball at the level that they want to against good teams and all of this stuff. And he wanted to go out and prove, him and Chip Kelly, that this is a physical football team against Michigan. We're not going to let Michigan bully us around. Man, yes, you have Judkins and Henderson, but where's your strength? Egbuka, Jeremiah Smith, the rest of and Michigan has their 2 best DBs out. And the one drive that you just went hurry up and quick, and you just spread the ball out to your guys, you scored damn near instantly. So why wouldn't you come out of halftime and do the same thing? No, they wanted to prove a point. We're not going to let Michigan push us around. And Michigan pushed you around.
Yeah. I think the big thing is that at the end of the day, you can sell me that this is a team that was embarrassed in their own backyard, and they deserve to kind of wear that crown. And I'm not going to sit here and try and argue that people who decide to plant flags, you have 3 hours to defend your home turf. If you can't do that, then unfortunately you don't own that place.
And people actually, yes, I 100% agree with that about the flag planting. Number one, it's not like they dig up your turf and plant the flag there. It's there for as long as somebody is going to hold it. It's sure. Like it's a ceremony, stick it in there, and then somebody's got to carry it back to the trailer. And when you lose, that would be like the Dallas Mavericks if they had lost the NBA championship last year to the Celtics in Dallas, and Luka Doncic running out on the field, running out on the court, tackling Jason Tatum and saying, "You're not going to celebrate on our court." Yes, we are. You are. To the winners go to spoil. Stop being soft.
The other thing that's really important is that they didn't tear up the turf the way Florida State did last year when they went to the swamp. So it's a little bit of different feel. This is still a roster that I think could easily win the national championship, which is the horrifying part, is that you can lose to Michigan, yet you have the talent that if given the right pathway, you can win a national title.
But do you believe that though? Because
do I believe talent-wise? Yes. Do I believe that they will? No.
Yeah, because Ryan Day, what he's put on tape so far, he is the Michael Jordan of James Franklin's right now.
You're not entirely wrong. You know who we don't know what to make of really at this point, because we haven't really seen them besides the Ohio State game, is Indiana. And they're at 11-1. They're going to go to the college football playoff. Kirk Cignetti, I think, belongs in that conversation right alongside Kenny Dillingham, right alongside, I'd throw in Dan Lanning, I'd throw in Dion, Coach of the Year. Because of not only has he raised the tobacco prices out in Bloomington, he's raised the morale because of just the way that he's been able to coach. When you look at a team like Indiana, what has been their biggest strength that could easily make them a threat in the college football playoff?
They are a top 10 scoring offense and a top 10 scoring defense. People talk about who they've played. But the reality is that they have it would be different if they were playing close games like, let's say, a BYU was. They were smothering teams, no matter who they played, except Ohio State. And that was their first big matchup. And people painted it like Ohio State just ran all over them. That's not what happened. This was a 7-7 game going into halftime. And then Indiana's punter just dropped the punt that hit him square in the hands. And then Ohio State scored. Then they returned a punt in the third quarter. It was their special teams that lost them that game, and then it just snowballed. This was not Ohio State's offense just going up and down the field, up and down the field, up and down the field. And that was one of the things that I was miffed about when people remember the Ohio State-Penn State game.
Yes.
Because that was a 9 a.m. kickoff, out here on the West Coast. And for the whole rest of the day, the television, all the media personalities were like, oh my God, this was a fantastic offensive performance by Ohio State. This was phenomenal. They scored 20 points against a team that couldn't move the football. So they were always in advantageous spots. And yes, that last drive, keeping the ball for the last 5 minutes, that was phenomenal. But their offense was not like clicking on all cylinders. I was watching the television like, what are they talking about?
Yeah. It was for me, it was more so, it was a better defensive performance once again from Jim Knowles' defense stepping on up, especially when it was on the road. I think that's going to be a big deal for a lot of these teams. I think that Kirk Cignetti is a big deal. Google him. I mean, all he does is win. He backs it up.
Some people don't like his arrogance and his bravado. But if you think about it, right, he's a guy who got a coaching job late in life. So he was at a Division II school, I believe it was, in Indiana. He left Alabama to go there. Wife wasn't on board at first because it was a huge pay cut. And he was like, baby, I believe. And then he gets the James Madison jobs. Turn James Madison to a winner.
He got the Elon job first. And then he
exactly. Elon. And then, so it's like, bro, what more do you want out of the man? Of course he's going to have some bravado because he's got to get his James Madison transfers to believe that we are as good as everybody else. And if your coach believes it and y'all live it every day, it's confidence that breeds great play. It is confidence that breeds exceptional play. We see so many times when, like, let's take Carson Beck, for example, over at Georgia. When Carson Beck is not playing with confidence, he stinks. He stinks.
You're not wrong. Yeah. You're not wrong.
He's playing with confidence, he looks like he should be a first-round pick. And when he's not, he looks like he definitely needs to come back to school, make as much NIL money as possible because he's not going to the NFL.
So basically, Cam Rising 2.0. What's going on in Utah? Let me get your thoughts on this because of this is fair. Let's just say by some scenario that there are 4 teams that are in from the SEC. I'll let you pick the 4th. You got Ole Miss, you got Alabama, you got South Carolina. From a Big Ten perspective.
Ole Miss is 100% out of the conversation. Okay, go on.
So just from this perspective, I still believe the SEC and the Big Ten run the show. They're the ones that are going to be writing the cash. They're going to be getting the paychecks. They're the reason why people will be paying attention. I want you, George, to build your perfect Big Ten versus SEC matchup between the 4 teams from the Big Ten and the 4 teams from the SEC that you think would be beneficial for the college football playoff 18 format, and more importantly, would be a must-see television spectacle.
Okay. So I will give you that. But the first thing I want to tell you is that, yes, the SEC, number one, historically has been the best conference. Like in terms of having the champion the most amount of times. And sometimes, for the last 10 years, especially Georgia and Alabama have been carrying everybody's weight except for 2019 LSU. Everybody else has been kind of running around on the coattails. But they have had the best team the most amount of times. But with the transfer portal, with NIL, the rosters are getting a little bit thinner. This is the new normal season. The SEC this year has no elite football teams. They have good football teams. They have some really some top tier football teams, but the elite football teams. And that's the difference between what we saw with the Big Ten this year and the SEC, is that in previous years, the top of the SEC would not lose to the middle and the bottom of the SEC. And until Michigan beat Ohio State, none of the top four teams in the Big Ten lost to any of the other good teams that aren't great, like Iowa, Minnesota. They just didn't lose to those teams. And that's the difference between the SEC and the Big Ten this particular year, is that, there's more parity within the league because there are no elite football teams, but they are still very dangerous and very good football teams. So to answer your question about the best matchups possible, because I think that these matchups should be happening in a non-conference too, but that's a whole that's a whole nother conversation. Is I would take, if I'm trying to predict the best, like most favorable matchups, I want to see Georgia, Oregon, because there's going to be a lot of storylines there with the Dan Lanning, Kirby Smart. They played a couple years ago, Dan Lanning's first game at Oregon. They kicked Oregon in the teeth and kicked them all the way back. They punted them back to Eugene. And now things are different. So I would go there. I would go Penn State, Alabama.
Okay.
Like I said earlier. And then I would put Tennessee up against Indiana.
That's the right answer, I think, too.
Because Indiana's defense is good. They can get stops, but Tennessee's offense is iffy enough at times to where it can be a good game. And because Tennessee is dangerous when Nico is not overthrowing wide receivers. And this is a kid that I got a chance to see at Warren High School. Him and my son are friends, and his brother and all that stuff, because I have a son who plays quarterback in college too. So they're all friends. And when Nico is good, that team is good. The team is special. And the defense is already really good. So I think that in Indiana would be a perfect matchup. And then finally, Texas and Ohio State.
I have no arguments. I think that's all fair. I think that every single one of those matchups is worth watching. I think if you want to switch out one Alabama for South Carolina with Penn State, another good matchup, run defense versus run defense, which mobile quarterback is able to get a little bit more production. I want to get your thoughts on this before we get on out of here, George. And then naturally, I want you to promote the show. You do fantastic work. Make sure that everyone gives them a follow at George Wrighster. George, I personally believe that there needs to be a scenario where if we're going to have clarity in the sport, and people want to complain about the SEC and the Big Ten having too much power, there needs to be a round robin-esque tournament in a sense, to where an ACC opponent, a Big Ten opponent, a Big 12 opponent, and an SEC opponent are on each other's schedule. And at the end of the year, whichever team has the best record among all the conferences, that's who gets the most representation. Because if you're saying that a Big 10 team, a Big 12 team is 6 games below 500, but they're all ranked 10-2 against each other, but both losses come to a Big 10 and an SEC school, end of argument right there. Because you can't argue that the Big 10 and the SEC doesn't work that way. Same thing for the ACC. See, I
have a fix for this. If I'm ever college football commissioner,
which
scheduling is going to be the number one thing I'm going to fix. Number one thing. That is first order of business. Centralizing officiating is number 2. So what I would do is I would lower everybody down to 8 conference games, because having some people play 9, some people play 8 is silly. And then we are going to play either 2 or 3 Power 4 non-conference games. And we are not going to schedule them out 5, 6, 10 years. We are going to create good matchups that are going to be good for fans. And we are going to mandate that and set it up that way the conferences play each other in a similar fashion to what you said, because it's going to create a lot more clarity upon things when you have the Big Ten playing the SEC, and then the Big Ten playing ACC games, Big 12 playing SEC, ACC, and Big Ten games. When you mix all of that up, it's going to come out with a much clearer picture of who the best teams are. because right now we're judging, trying to wonder, oh, what would Arizona State do against this team? What would Miami, how would they fare versus these teams? And how would SMU fare? Because the thing that hasn't happened this year, which is, and we've seen it, is there is a lot of bias, right? Because people typically before conference realignment, like Big 12 fans focused on the Big 12, the SEC fans focused on the Big 12. Everybody else sucks. People like me and you, I don't know anybody that watches more college football than me, probably. Nobody. To my wife's chagrin. But she knows, don't bother me on no damn Saturday.
She does the same thing over here too, so don't worry. Yeah. You're in this, we're covering the same cloth, George.
And there's been so much logo paying attention to, right? Because if you replace SMU's logo with Texas's logo, they actually switch spots in the college football playoff. Because SMU would be, their schedule looks like Texas's.
Yeah.
And their wins look like Texas's so far. And if you replace, and that's an ACC school. And if you replace Arizona State, people would be screaming about what Arizona State is doing if you replace their logo with South Carolina's, because it's an SEC logo. And now people are like, South Carolina should be in the playoff. Bro, they lost to Alabama and they got beat the hell up by Ole Miss. What more do you want? I mean, at some point in time, the results on the field have to matter. And I got a video coming out on Unafraid Show today about, I was looking at the football playoff index, the ESPN's football playoff index, the FPI, yesterday was ridiculous. And then I went back and remembered that I was mad at it in 2023 too. Quick examples. So Oregon is ranked number 6 in the football playoff index, the team that is the betting favorite for the national championship. Alabama is in front of them. 3-loss Alabama, who lost to Oklahoma, who's not going to a bowl game.
No, they're going, but they're 6-6. They got the win to cut them.
Yeah, they are 6-6 now. Yeah, but they were below 500 at the time. And Vanderbilt. So a 3-loss team. And then Texas is in front of them. Notre Dame, who lost to Northern Illinois. Ole Miss is in front. They got Ohio State is in front of them, who they beat and just lost to Michigan, who Oregon beat, is in front of them in the football playoff index. And last year, in 2023, who played in the national championship?
Well, I guess at the end of the day, it'd be 2 Big Ten teams. We're going to go.
Yeah, it was Washington and Michigan. Michigan at 15-0 finished number 1 in ESPN's football playoff index. Washington, who was 14-0 going into that game, finished 14-1. They beat Texas in the semifinal. 2-loss Texas, who lost to Oklahoma and then to Washington, finished 5 spots in front of them in the final football playoff index. And this was, I think, a 1-score game in the national championship on an undefeated team. And my Oregon Ducks, who I love, you see the helmet right there. We finished 4th in the football playoff index last year. We finished 12-2. Do you know who those 2 losses were to?
Oh, it's about to Washington.
They both were to Washington. So why is Washington at 11? How does this make any sense? You beat a team twice, the Pac-12 championship and during the regular season. Yes, they were both close and by 3 points. And a team that beat Texas and played in the national championship at 14-1, finished 11th. What are we doing here?
You can't even. There's times where you can say it's human error, because that's what happens with the college football playoff committee, because they have no idea what they're doing half the time. But it's an algorithm in this one, so it's a computer. So it's, how can we even argue at that point? It's like when we say
the humans who set the terms of the algorithm, and they're fine with how it comes out. And this is why people like Danny Cannell, me, other people push back so hard on the SEC, and it feels like hate sometimes, because it's not because we don't recognize that the SEC is really good. Now, granted, I'm in a different boat than Danny Cannell because he goes a little too far sometimes.
We gotta reel him back into reality at points.
Yeah, it's because when you look at stuff like the FPI and it's favoring the big brands or the SEC brands, it's frustrating because you're just like, how can we have any success if the narrative is always going to be that it is that the analytics always say that the SEC is better no matter what happens on the field.
Fair. Listen, very fair. George, before I get you on out of here, you brought up the SEC. Say something nice about the SEC before I let you go. Just one thing.
Oh, the SEC, they put a lot of guys in the NFL. They have a lot of really talented teams. Oh, so excuse me. They have a lot of very talented rosters when it comes to recruiting rankings, but recruiting rankings don't win football games.
Fair enough.
And here's the thing, and here's my final thing, and then is that it is tough to even trust the recruiting rankings all the time because I have a kid who's being recruited. My nephew, I'm around a lot of these kids. And when you see a kid that was ranked 900 and something who was committed to Georgia State, picks up a Georgia offer, and now he's ranked 300 and something in the country. It was the same kid the day before.
How about this? How about when a kid goes from being at an SEC school, then goes to a Big 12 school, and he drops a whole star grade?
Yeah.
Happens all the time.
Yep.
Same thing. George, let the fine people know where they can find out your work, and let them also know where they can make sure they continue to watch your great content.
You guys can meet me on Unafraid Show on YouTube. Man, so much college football content every single week. And we sprinkle in some other stuff. It's like mostly college football, like 85-90% college football. You can find us on Twitter at Unafraid Show, at George Wrighster. And I'm the guy that responds to you on social because this is about us, Unafraid Show, US. It's about us because we love college football. We love sports, and we know that you guys do too.
George is one of the best in the industry. That's why I have him on. That's going to do it for us here on SEC Unfiltered. Make sure that you like, review, hit subscribe, hit that ring notification. That way you don't miss out on any bit of the content found on the channel. Make sure that you go over to George's channel, George Wrighster, the Unafraid Show, to give him some quality content because he's producing left and right. He is one of the best in the industry. Make sure that you check out all of our great work found at SECUnfiltered.com. And make sure that you're following us on the social channels, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. For George Wrighster, I'm Cole Thompson. We're going to have a college football playoff battle between the Big Ten and the SEC at the end of the day, so you might as well embrace it. Peace.
Peace.